Let's get started. Again, welcome to our webinar. Today's webinar is a joint effort between the California Landscape Contractors Association, the Irrigation Association, the National Association of Landscape Professionals, and Marina Besnick and Associates. I want to especially thank Sandra Jardy, Executive Director of CLCA, Natasha Rankin, the CEO of the Irrigation Association, and Andrew Bray from National Association of Landscape Professionals, who's the Vice President of Government Relations, for all their work in putting this together. It's important for us to all work together as an industry, especially during these challenging times. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be shared afterwards. All attendees are muted, so if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A session, and time allowing at the end of our presentations, we will do our best to answer your questions. If we're unable to answer your questions, someone will follow up with you offline. So let's talk about who our panelists are today. And first of all, who am I? My name is Warren Gorwitz, Director of Corporate Social Responsibility of Hunter Industries, and I'm a past president of the Irrigation Association, also a past president of the Los Angeles San Gabriel Valley chapter of CLCA, and a past associate member rep on the state CLCA board. And I've been involved in a variety of committees in all three hosting organizations today, and it's really my honor to moderate today's important discussion. And now for our other panelists and presenters. Marina Besnick has been a leader in water efficiency for the past 31 years. Marina runs a consulting firm specializing in strategic planning, program design, and management. And throughout her career, Marina has implemented over 50 major residential and commercial water efficiency programs. Peter Sternis is a landscape contractor and life member of CLCA. Peter was state president of CLCA in 2007, and Peter has worked on the last 3 revisions of the California's Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. He's also served as a director of CLCA's Certified Water Management Program, and he also served as a director of the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Program and is currently a QUEL board member. Welcome, Peter and Maureen.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, thanks, Warren.
So we are no stranger to drought in California. And if you look at the things that are going on around us, from aridification to climate change, the historical low snowpack, which is leading to severe conditions, which are affecting our water supply. And it's because of that that the state of California is considering unprecedented restrictions, which may increase in the future. I want to remind you that the info that we're sharing with you today is as current as when we put this presentation together. Things are changing quickly, so as always, we want to encourage you to make sure you check with your local water agency for up-to-date information. So let's get started with our presentation as far as the information we want to share with you today. So what is California implementing statewide for outdoor water restrictions? Maureen?
Thank you, Warren, and thank you for everyone taking time out of your busy schedules to participate today. As Warren stated, these really are unprecedented times. This is a serious water shortage. I've been in the industry over 30 years and never seen this dire of a situation, and it's not likely to change anytime soon. I hate this term, or I really don't like this term, but it is the new normal. In California, we receive 50% of our water from snowpack, typically mostly up in the Sierras, that comes down through the streams and rivers into our communities. And it's getting hotter, it's getting drier, and the water is getting absorbed into the soil and evaporating at a much higher rate. They're calling it aridification. Our California climate, the climate is changing. Like last year, we had a decent snowpack, 78%, but only 30% of that turned into runoff. And so that water doesn't flow down through our rivers and streams and isn't available to our communities to use. So currently, all Californians are being asked to voluntarily cut back 15%. That's likely to become mandatory if use doesn't significantly drop in the next couple of months. January through April of this year are the driest on record. And as it would make sense, because it was drier, use went up. In March, use was up statewide almost 20% compared to March 2020. So not the direction that the state or local water agencies wanted or needed. And about 50 to 60% of our urban water use is used for landscape irrigation. So the state is taking dramatic measures to reduce that use, and specifically in the commercial market. The governor's order, which goes into effect today for 1 year, bans the watering of non-functional turf in commercial, industrial, and institutional properties. That includes common areas of HOAs. This does not impact residential. Single-family homes are not included in the ban. So the legal definition of non-functional turf is solely ornamental, not used for civic community events, and not used for human recreation. So another way to look at it is that if you only walk on it to mow it, it's non-functional. If you picnic on it, if the kids play on it, if there are people actually using it, then it's considered functional. Local water retailers are responsible for enforcement, so enforcement is going to differ from community to community. Next slide. There are some exemptions to the ban. If you are using non-potable or recycled water for irrigation, that is exempt. If there are trees in the non-functional turf area, you can water the trees. Turf grasses, some of which are being researched at UCR and other universities that have a plant factor of 0.3 or less, are exempt, although not common. And anything for health and safety reasons can be exempted. There's still a lot of flexibility and discretion left up to the local retail water agencies that are doing the enforcement. They're really trying to take this as an opportunity to educate customers. They don't want to fine customers. However, it's going to be heavily dependent upon that local community. We're still waiting on final word from the state, but most multifamily properties will be exempt. But there may be some multifamily properties that have mixed use. They have commercial entities at their property, or they have large common areas. They may be considered non-functional. The play area of golf courses of course, would be considered functional. However, the non-playable areas of the course may be deemed non-functional. Then we're still not sure about cemeteries and subsurface irrigation. We expect the state to come up with a FAQ, frequently asked questions sheet, that will hopefully, in the next week or so, that will hopefully provide a lot more direction. As I stated earlier, the current statewide reduction target is 15%. In addition to the ban on watering of non-functional turf, each water retailer is required to implement all water saving measures, interventions, restrictions, prohibitions, et cetera, under stage 2 of their water shortage contingency plan, which is a 10 to 20% reduction. Most water agencies' stage 2 measures include prohibitions of any water waste, including runoff from irrigation, and most will have day of week watering restrictions, but anywhere from 1 to 3 days per week. Next.
So what kind of things are going on locally?
Well, it's going to be different from agency to agency. Areas might be right next to each other, properties right across the street from each other, and have different restrictions. Metropolitan Water District, the wholesaler of water in Southern California, has put restrictions on some of their member agencies. Their member agencies, the retail agencies that you or your customer buy from, that are dependent upon water coming from the State Water Project. They have proposed specific restrictions for those agencies. The state has reduced the allocation from the State Water Project to 5%. So these agencies are only getting 5% of that water, and therefore they have to use storage or reserves, and that MWD has been building for the last couple decades, but it's not going to last forever. So they need us to do our part to reduce now. And even if it rains over the next couple of years, we're still going to be in a supply shortage because we need to build back up reserves and reservoirs, et cetera. So MWD has given agencies that receive water from the State Water Project in the counties of Ventura, Los Angeles, and San Bernardino County 2 options: move to 1 day a week watering, or reduce your state water purchases. So have a volumetric reduction. And it really depends upon the agency's water supply portfolio. If they have other sources such as groundwater, recycle water, or any other source, then that they can use to offset their state water project supplies, then they're going to take a different tactic. In general, most Ventura County agencies which are heavily reliant upon the state water project have chosen to move to 1-day week watering. And most retail water agencies in Los Angeles and San Bernardino County are at 2 or 3 days per week, they're taking the volumetric reduction and moving to 2 or 3 days per week. If they don't achieve these reductions, they're facing fines on their water purchases of triple the cost. So it's significant and it's serious. And although San Diego and Orange counties aren't facing some of these same restrictions, they're still in a severe drought and required to implement stage 2 of their water shortage contingency plans.
Peter.
So in my area of Northern California, the big picture right now is that similar to 2021, the State Water Resources Control Board is considering, and I think has just suspended water rights for the Russian River watershed again. This time it's a little different, that they are working a little bit like a voluntary sharing agreement between holders, whereas last year it was frozen completely to like 1,800 water right holders. The State Water Resources Control Board is looking at more of a we're all in this together approach. Where this is significant is this time last year, the city of Healdsburg canceled all irrigation, outdoor irrigation in their township. They put people on a 74-gallon per day water allotment, and the only water you could get was either reclaimed or you could hand water, but you could not get past that 74-gallon per person per day. In November, Healdsburg changed and went to 2-day-a-week watering because of the major atmospheric event we had in late October. In March or April, the Healdsburg came out with 3-day-a-week watering on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And as landscape contractor, I programmed controllers to meet that. I just looked at their website, and now we're on an every other day cutback. So even numbered homes can water on even numbered days of the month, and odd numbers on odd numbered days of the month, which is actually an increase. The target now is a 20% reduction in the city. So what I'm pointing out is the fluidity, pun intended, of the situation, probably in more than just my area. Next slide, Lauren.
So one thing I want to call to everybody's attention, and you can look at all the dots on the slides here, on the slide on the right picture, but the fact is that there are over 400 water agencies in California. So things are definitely going to vary depending on where you are. So now we're going to talk about specific examples in a variety of different areas throughout the state, and turn this one back over to Maureen as we go back to Southern California for a few slides.
Yeah, I mean, you named it. There are 400 plus water retailers. Every one of them is going to have different restrictions, and it's fluid. It's depending upon the local supply. So those restrictions may go up and down depending upon their very local situation. So like we already discussed, most Ventura agencies, Simi Valley, Calabasas, Thousand Oaks, Camarillo, they're at 1 day a week. Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency, which serves Santa Clarita, obviously, but Valencia, Newhall area, is at 3 days per week. And they also allow for more days if you are using high efficiency sprinkler nozzles, such as MP rotators or Toro Precision or drip. LADWP, the city of LA, is at 2 day a week watering. They do allow for longer run times for high efficiency nozzles and drip, 15 minutes versus 8 minutes, which is called out in the local ordinance. And then 2 days, and there are 2 days per week. LA County Waterworks, which serves like Malibu, Topanga Marina, is at 2 days per week. Glendale, same with Glendale and Pasadena. Burbank is at 3. Most Orange County and Riverside and San Diego agencies are at 2 days per week. But you have to do your homework. You're going to have to research who the local water agency is and what the local restrictions are for the properties you serve.
How about up in Northern California, Peter? You're muted.
So adding on to what Maureen just said, City of Sacramento, they're at 8-day-a-week watering with exceptions for newly installed landscapes and tree irrigation. Smart controllers, I don't like calling them smart, let's call them weather-based controllers, can water any day, but no more than 2 times per week. Drip and hand watering can be done at any time, which you know, you're going to have to call and ask specifically what this means. Is can drip be handled by a smart controller anytime, that type of thing. Fresno, 3-day-a-week per watering. Next slide, please. Marin County is an interesting prospect. They are now at overhead irrigation 2 days per week and drip at 3 days per week. They also don't allow watering from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The funny thing about Marin County is last year in July and August, it was 1 day a week for overhead and 2 day a week for drip. We spent time working with Marin on what that would mean to lawns. They had an expert from UC Davis come in. We worked on a, you know, kind of what they could expect. But that atmospheric river we had filled up their reservoirs pretty nicely. So they've moderated a bit this year. Santa Rosa, which is Sonoma County, the largest city in Sonoma County, has a 20% mandatory reduction, no other action, and with watering only from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Next slide. East Bay Municipal Utility District, they're aggressive. They've got a 10% mandatory reduction, 3 day per week watering, water window, and they've added an 8% drought surcharge. And finally, the Santa Clara Valley is at 2 day per week watering. So you can kind of see by what we've been discussing here that the restrictions to certain days per week seems to be a consistent playbook for water retailers. Next slide, Warren.
I think that brings up an interesting point, and we had some discussion about this when we were practicing or going through our practice sessions on Friday about the fact that for the positive, we don't have a one-size-fits-all for the whole state of California, right, because of the different water situation going on throughout the state. I mean, it's kind of a mixed thing because it's also makes it so much more complicated as well. So now the $64,000 question is how does somebody go about finding out and learning about their local water restrictions? Maureen?
Yeah, well, it's a bit manual. First and foremost, you got to find out who the water provider is for that property, which really isn't that hard. Most water agencies are cities or special districts. And if you enter the city or community name and water district, water agency, it should pop up with that local water agency. Then you go, you need to go onto their website. And most of them right now, because of the situation, are going to probably have their watering restrictions on their landing page. But if they don't, there's probably a link that's to water conservation, water efficiency, save water. And if you link down through there, you can also search for their water waste ordinance as well. And at the same time, you should be able to, while you're doing that, find out what local incentives they have available, as well as if they have free landscape assessments, things, some agencies have standard incentives for smart controllers or high efficiency nozzles. Some have performance-based incentives. It would be a good time to research those incentives as well and create a relationship with the water conservation staff. So you can understand the changing supply situation. Like Peter spoke about at Marin, that within a month their restrictions changed and likely some of their programs as well. So you need to find out what are the changing supply conditions, what are the reduction targets changing, are there changes in restrictions, and how are they going to be enforcing those restrictions? If you're using water efficiently, well within a budget, ask for an exemption. there's no promise that you'll get it, but it definitely won't hurt. And some of them will allow for them. And talk to your clients so that they know you're on it, that you're managing their property so that they don't receive violation notices or fines, and explain what you're doing to comply with all of the restrictions.
I think that's a good point. I think it's really important to make sure that you are, especially in this time, establishing good communication with your clients. So you know what's going on, they know what's going on. I think that is, especially in this time, really important.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't going away. The drought is, it's here, and it's likely that not only restrictions will play, but that the water agencies are going to ask for property owners and managers to operate more efficiently. So this is the time to do it and get ahead of it. Get ahead of it with your clients so they understand the value you're bringing to them by operating efficiently, not just with lower water bills, but with complying with whatever requirements that the water agencies are implementing.
And wouldn't you also agree that this is also an opportunity, especially for people that are doing landscape retrofits, to take advantage of the also equally unprecedented amount of money that's being made or will be made and has been made available for rebate programs? Because we don't know if those are going to necessarily be here in the long haul, and for how long, because of a lot of other interesting reasons.
Yeah, I mean, the money may dry up because it's going to be first come, first serve. Also, sometimes when they put restrictions in, like in Vegas, where non-functional turf is banned completely, they're giving incentives for a period of time, but they're going to take those incentives away once they've promoted it well enough. If it's law, why are they going to want to pay an incentive for it?
So thank you, Maureen. Let's talk about what green industry professionals should be doing during this time.
Thanks, Warren. So like Maureen said, educating your clients is probably high on the list. I'm guessing that most clients, if they're on public water, are going to be getting notices on a regular basis from their municipalities, and you might not be. So staying in touch with them to review those, or at least getting onto the website once a month, beginning of the month, might be helpful. Read their meter, help them out, right? So my company reads meters every time we're on a job site, and we document that reading for entry into a water budgeting software. So we are aware at any given time where their water use is and where it's heading, and we can actually pinpoint areas where they might exceed their allotment or where they want to be. So that's something to consider if you're not already doing that. There's also an issue of overwatering, so that a lot of folks are going to get to the 2-day-a-week restriction, and they're going to try to water for 24 hours or as long as they can in that window, whether they have 2 valves or 10. Let them know that overwatering is not good for the landscape or the chance of runoff as well. The importance of soil health. If at this point you haven't done enough for your soil, it's probably too late this year, but it's something that could be looked at for the fall and winter when we do get a return to at least some rain. If you do see something coming in, then it's certainly worth doing some moderation of soil health. If you can take advantage of Mother Nature's watering. We did so over the weekend. We had a nice ½ inch of rain up here that is going to be very helpful to our drought settings on our controllers. Converting irrigation to more efficient. The irrigation manufacturers have done a stupendous job over the last 30 years of creating water efficient products. The state of California has helped out with the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance and mandating that these are certified equipment. They've banned water saving or
Non-pressure regulating spray.
Non-pressure regulated, sorry. And there's a ton of water saving technology out there. There is a learning curve, but most manufacturers and distributors are more than willing to spend time with you as a professional. A lot of times they're willing to spend time with homeowners, and you can attend seminars, get certified in different aspects of water saving technology. It's not very time consuming. They've done a good job. I've worked a lot with the Hunter University, and their material is fairly straightforward and fairly short, so you don't have to spend days and days doing it. Developing relationships with water providers. Maureen mentioned that. I can't tell you how important that is, to be at the table when these folks are making decisions that are not from the stakeholder side or from the purveyor side. Working with associations like the CLCA, the IA, NALP, and others gives us the ability to have documentation, data sets, supportive documentation, things like that, that can really help sit down with water providers and create like landscape water advisory groups, so that you can look at them and say, look, we get that you're going to get 1 day a week watering. We get that you're going there, but here's the ramification of doing that. You need to let your clients or your hookups know that 1 day a week watering is probably not going to be good for the lawn long term, and it will probably adversely affect it to the point where it'll probably need replaced, unless perhaps it's well established, you've got a really healthy soil. So just communicating that in a room with water providers, and the ones that I've been associated with have done a superb job of listening to the industry side of things. Their specialties are not where ours lie, but together we complement each other in a great way that can actually lead to some very healthy approaches to water use efficiency in communities. We put our clients on a drought schedule that's on a spreadsheet. We give that to them, put them in their controllers. It's labeled as a drought plan. And we program the controller to that and manage it either weekly or monthly, depending on the client and the account. Become certified in water use efficiency. Most of us should have done this already. We've been at this for more than 30 years. At this point in time, we should be certified to some degree or another, and let your clients know that. Next slide, Warren.
Yeah, Peter, I think the part about getting to know your water provider and getting involved, like you said, this isn't their expertise. They're trying to figure out, how do I save this volume of water? Well, I can calculate that 1 day a week watering would do that. I don't think they understand all of the impacts or what the other options are. Is there another solution that the landscape industry can come to the table and move away from restrictions and say, this is how we can prove that we are going to save through this technology or this program, or some way that the water purveyor could feel that they were assured that was going to produce the water reductions that they knew that they need. But what should the green industry pros be doing? Look up what incentives are available at the properties you serve. Most agencies have incentives for smart controllers and high efficiency nozzles, some for pressure regulation and drip, and a lot for turf replacement. There may be local incentives, so the local water retailer who the customer pays the water bill to might have incentives, but there's also regional programs in South San Francisco, Santa Clara, and Southern California. In Southern California, most customers are eligible for MWD SoCal Water Smart incentives. They offer incentives for $35 per station for smart controllers, $2 for high efficiency nozzles. But a lot of agencies add money onto those. So those are their base incentives. If you visit SoCalWaterSmart.com, you can enter in an address and it will estimate the rebate. It will show the available rebates for that property, and it will estimate the rebate based upon the actual address. Again, this is different as different as the restrictions. The incentives differ as well. But many agencies like LAWP add money. SoCal WaterSmart also offers turf replacement rebates. Right now in Southern California, the base rebate is $2 for residential per square foot for residential and commercial, $3 for public sector customers. And these, and many agencies, like I said, add money onto that, and then it's going up by another $1 in July. And it's going to be a first come, first served basis. So that will be a $3 base incentive for commercial and residential, $4 for public sector, and up to probably $5 in some locations. And if you have public sector customers, or you are a public sector customer, and because you can't water the non-functional turf, it might be the prime opportunity to look at replacing the turf in those areas. There's also pending legislation like the energy efficiency industry has had for a long time, which would make incentives tax exempt. It's pending, but it's likely. I would also recommend talking to your customers about doing a full valve by valve assessment and then prioritize the upgrades. So make sure that they, understand the value of doing this. And as Peter said, create a water budget for the property. First, you'll need to modify your irrigation schedule to meet the specific local watering restrictions, but then set a plan. Like first make these repairs and fixes, then upgrade this portion to efficient equipment. And in areas where, like we talked about, where there's non-functional turf that can't be watered, consider turf replacement, especially while there's these lucrative incentives. They're not going to be there forever. And working with your customers so that they understand the supply, the conditions that, this isn't going away. Droughts are intensifying. They're happening more often. So do everything you can do now so that to make the properties that you work on drought resilient, and explain the value that you're bringing to your customers by doing this, and let them know you're doing everything that you can. And some water purveyors also are paying you can make a reservation for your turf incentive this summer and defer installations to fall when it's cooler and hopefully more rain. And they're allowing for extending the time for those projects.
Let's talk through, Peter, the importance of water budgets.
Real briefly, to follow up what Maureen just said about deferring to the fall, we actually have a design build client in Petaluma that is part of a brand new subdivision, and the subdivision is not allowed to plant the landscape until the fall of this year, but they are allowing the backyards to be installed. But we are required to submit to the water efficient landscape ordinance. So that's kind of an interesting new up our way. That's the first time I've seen this. We have been recommending to our clients in the Healdsburg market that I talked about to not plant this summer because of the nature of what Healdsburg seems to be up against. We just thought that we just did not get enough water to offset the effect from last year, and kind of figured that we would probably be in the same boat and have 3-4 clients right now that we've wrapped up everything we can with the exception of planting. So they're going to get mulched, and that's about it until at least the fall. And I'm sorry, but it's the right thing to do, and it hurts everybody. We like planting and getting things growing, and to offset this and then to keep that as a loose end on our bid boards, job boards, is a little frustrating, but we're all in this together. And if we don't step up, who's going to? Which brings us to landscape budgeting, water budgeting. I cannot say enough about the importance of moving to this process. We have been trying to do this since the first model water efficient landscape ordinance was written in 1990s. We thought it would happen in the 2010 update. We thought for sure it was going to happen in the 2015 update. And we're still trying to get folks to work on water budgets for their landscapes. You cannot manage what you do not measure. And water budgeting is the approach to cut back our water use in California without a lot of harm and bad feelings. Every landscape has an amount of water it needs in this state. It's a combination of the weather, the plant types that are in the landscape, and the area landscaped. And you can put together a pretty simple allowance for a year, a month, a week, or a day. There is even software out there to do that. The California Landscape Contractors Association has a whole certification program around water budgeting that is performance-based. It is unbelievably result-oriented. I cannot tell you how many projects when we started this, and we thought that we were efficient in our water use, and we were overwatering to, on average, of 15 to 25% before we started complete water budgeting. And this is a company that's been involved in Xeriscape conferences, manufacturing updates, certifications, and until we started reading water meters and analyzing how much water was actually needed, we were as guilty as everybody else of overwatering. We still get that way because of breaks and not paying attention and things like that. But overall, all our landscapes are set to water budgets via the CLCA program. Please, if you take nothing away from this, look into water budgeting. I always tell folks that we're working with, let me put you on a water budget. Let's let it irrigate to that water budget for 2 to 3 weeks. When we see the issues come up, if any, then let's analyze those issues and create a proposal or a plan to change that to something more efficient that will fit with the budget. But I object to starting out with, let's replace all these plants, let's switch out to drip, let's do this, that, and the other, let's put in that water-based irrigation controller when you don't have a baseline to start with. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Water budget, water budget, water budget.
No, please stay on the soapbox, because that's it. I mean, we need 10 to 20% reduction. Look at, you're even saying when you've already thought you were doing the right thing, that just by looking at the data, you saw that there was an opportunity for 10 to 20% reduction. And I bet most properties have that opportunity. And like you said, not only we're all in this together, but if we don't reduce now, restrictions are going to get worse. You know, like you said, in Marin and Healdsburg last year, it was, which is Healdsburg, that was 0 day a week.
Yep.
Well, if we don't see those reductions in other places in the state, that's likely to happen in other places as well. So this also makes complete sense, just as you would manage your own personal life, having by a budget. And in fact, when looking at where the state wants to go, the state is actually going to be pushing water budgets down to water agencies. So they have measured all of the irrigated, irrigable and irrigable and irrigated area, irrigable, not irrigated, and not irrigable area in the state. And they are they're going to put, water agencies are going to be given a budget themselves. And if they use over that amount, and they'll get a per capita amount as well, based on their population. And if they use over that amount, they will face fines of up to $10,000 a day, depending upon what type of water situation it is. So it is the future too, but it also makes sense because, as Warren was saying earlier, everything is local, right? The weather's local, the whatever plant type is local, slopes and the soil type, all of that is so local that you need to figure out what that site specifically needs and water to it. And don't run off, because that's where another thing that when we're looking at enforcement of these new restrictions, that most agencies will have a day of week watering, and they'll have a time that you can water, during past 6 or 7 at night, before 8 in the morning. But they're also going to be looking for runoff. That is going to be where people will either file complaints or agency staff will see the runoff, and that's how they'll know. We don't. That is complete waste of water. So those are hence reasons to do an assessment and have a water budget as your base activity.
Another anecdote: in 2015, the last drought, was it 2015 or 2016, the last cycle, we put everybody on a drought program, and then the state came down with those percentage reductions based on how you were doing. We cut back ours to the recommended budget. I think in Healdsburg it was 13%. So we cut back from our water budget 13% and saw absolutely no visible change in the landscapes. There were no brown spots that weren't there before. So even meeting the state goals with a water budget, it can be done without a lot of adverse effects to the landscape. Now you got to understand that was a cool year and we're in Northern California. I'm not necessarily recommending that extreme approach in areas that are much drier and warmer. What I am saying is learn how to water budget, set your programs to meet that water budget, and then analyze the result based on that water budget, not based on strictly just changing plant material out, because we all know that some folks, whether it's a lawn or whether it's a manzanita, will water the same amount. So water budgets, girls and boys.
I think I would just add on the water budget bandwagon here. I think what's also nice is the fact that it gives the landscape professional, as you've been talking about, the ability to make those decisions on your own, as opposed to being so prescriptive, which a lot of the restrictions tend to be very prescriptive. And so, again, I mean, it's, yeah, we could spend the whole time talking about water budgets. We've got a couple more slides and we have 49 questions in the Q&A. We're certainly not going to get to all 49, but I've been trying to go through and kind of parse some out. So let's get through a couple more of our slides so we can answer questions from our attendees as well. So we talked about exemptions to water restrictions as well. Trees, being able to irrigate trees was one of those, correct?
Yes. You know, the state has a Save Our Trees program. The non-functional turf, you can still water the trees, and most local agencies would exempt that from other restrictions as well.
So that means that if you have an irrigation system that is covering your non-functional turf, but it also covers the trees, you can technically still water the non-functional turf in order to water those trees?
Correct. Now, you may have a local water agency that's going to use that as an education opportunity to come in and say, okay, is there a way that you can bring in a different irrigation portion of your system here? Can you set up a drip or bubbler or something to actually water the tree?
Specifically the trees, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't want the trees to die, you know, so there is that they are specifically called out in the executive order as being exempt.
Which is different than previous drought extremes, correct? Because I don't remember seeing trees.
Yeah. Oh, and the last round of drought, we lost a lot of trees. So that's hence the reason they started the Save Our Trees program, which is mostly an educational campaign that just to show how important it is to, even though we are in drought, to get water to your trees.
Good, good. Let's see what else we have. We talked about the trees. Other exemptions to water restrictions as well.
I mean, it's going to be, again, very localized, whether or not maybe like in LADWP or Santa Clarita, they might have some exemptions if you have high efficiency irrigation. But I would also look to ask for exemptions. Ask for exemptions if you're meeting a water budget. Ask for exemptions if you have put in high efficiency irrigation. It's definitely worth a try. And then newly installed plant materials, again, that's going to be very local, whether or not they, you know, whether or not a water agency is allowing newly installed plants to be irrigated. Most probably are, but you again, you need to research it. Great.
All right, now the time that the audience has been waiting for. Let's get to some of your questions here. And again, if you have questions, you certainly please put them in the Q&A section in Zoom. Don't put it in the chat because we won't be able to see them. So I'm going to go through these questions as quickly as I can, and I'll let the panelists decide who wants to answer them. But one of the first ones that came up actually, which I was curious about, was from what was read, did the Water Board approve the order, but does it still need to be approved by the Office of Administrative Law, or did the Office of Administrative Law approve this new order, statewide order?
That is a very good question. We'll have to get back on that. I'm not positive. Okay. I know that the Water Board approved it that afternoon, but I'm not sure of the process after that.
Okay. How about, what is the baseline being used when we talk about these percent reductions? What's
2020? 2020 is the year.
Okay, 2020 is the year. Great. We talked about this on our rehearsal call, but specific examples of turf grass with plant factors of less than 0.3? Anybody know any?
Didn't we say
I
it was
said artificial
synthetic
turf was one of them, but that's not a real turf grass, or it's not a live turf grass necessarily. But seriously though, I mean, where did they come up with that 0.3?
There are some pilots being done in
Okay.
Irvine and through UCR and some other universities. So it's mostly that I think is that if they've been working hard on some of these pilot projects, they want to be able to exempt them from the law, because they're also going to look like, there's also a perspective of what, when another customer sees something being irrigated that looks like turf, how can they explain that?
Okay, great.
We've had luck with a ground cover called Carapia, watering to get it established. I think we started at 3 days a week, then went to 2, went to 1, turned it off. So the recommendation was when it gets to where you want it to stop, you stop watering. And we did that. Unfortunately, it was October, so we didn't really get a good result through the winter. We turned it back on in the spring for 1 day a week, because the winter up here is a little harsh on it. The freezing temperatures in valleys will have a tendency to have it go dormant. It usually comes back below, but it's a little rough. So all indications are that we can get down to 0.3 with that in our area. The other one that we planted on the same site was buffalo grass, the UC Verde. And we had the same kind of success with that at 1 day a week watering that we did with the Carapia. So we're a little encouraged by it. The downside to it, up here we have an aversion to Bermuda grass, and it definitely looks a lot like Bermuda grass when it's growing. It doesn't quite have as green a tint. It does have a tendency to get a little dry around the tufts and a little purpley as it goes into winter, but it spread really quick from plugs, and filled the gap within 6 weeks. It was completely full, and I think we planted like 1,300 square feet with overhead MP rotators, and I was very happy with the net result of that for low water. So there might be a couple options there that we could play with.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I'm going to put this question out there because I know it's something that probably a lot of people are wondering, and maybe we don't have enough time to discuss the answer, but as a percentage of usage of the state's water use, how much real impact is landscape watering reductions mandates impacting the overall state targets? I mean, that is definitely a valid concern and a question that I've heard a lot asked. Do either of you have an opinion on that you want to share publicly while being recorded? I'm just kidding.
I mean, if we're talking about urban water use, it has a huge impact, especially when you're looking at residential. We've done a lot indoors. We've done a lot of toilets and shower heads and washers, etc. There's still a lot of over irrigating that's happening. So I think if it's 50 to 60% of use in a lot of communities of their urban use, then there's a significant opportunity. And it's just hard when you're thinking about, as a water agency, to make these big use generalizations. Like commercial and industrial water use has so many different variables. It's hard to set standards for those types of things. It's a bit easier in residential. It's a bit easier in landscape when we have things like water budgets where you can evaluate whether or not it's efficient or not. So the opportunity is huge, and it's also an easier way for a local district to be able to set just general policy.
So are there not just as many opportunities or greater opportunities to improve agricultural irrigation efficiency in the state as well? Or they're being asked, are we an easier target in some respects too, maybe?
In some ways, and I think in the last drought that a lot of single family customers and water agencies felt that it was on the backs of single family homeowners, hence the reason that I think that they've focused on the CII non-functional turf.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
But I do think that ag is being asked to do stuff too. I don't, like they're being asked to reduce as well. And there are big issues happening in the Central Valley. They're in an extreme drought in that area and have had, some watering restrictions for longer than us. So I don't know all the details, and I think that it could get very political, but
understood.
But there's still opportunity on the urban side that we should take because it makes good business sense as well.
Understood. Yeah, thank you. What about any thoughts around what's behind the drought surcharge that, as an example, that East Bay Municipal Utility District is doing? Is that truly just to make up for lost revenue, or because of reduced water use?
But I also think it's sending a price signal too, because well,
Okay.
one thing is that water agencies are under a thing called Prop 218, so they can't just change a rate and say like, okay, now all of a sudden at the top tier, you're going to pay more. So
Right.
they'll call it a drought surcharge. And so it's just a way to send a price signal to get people to reduce their use.
All right. Does the restriction of irrigating non-functional turf apply to sites on well water? Is that probably individually, you need to check with your local water agency on that one? Well,
that's
actually,
a different, that's a horse of a different color. So back in, what was it, 2013, the Groundwater Sustainability Act passed, and there was a huge report that was written. And I think it was by, I don't know, last couple of years, the different areas of the state were required to create agencies for groundwater sustainability. I know in my area, we have been put on notice that well users will be charged a certain fee based on the amount that's being pulled out, whether, it'll be different for commercial and residential. I'm on a well, and they're telling me that my fee is going to be based on half an acre foot of water draw per year, which is nowhere close. I mean, it's a lot more than I use in my house, but that's where it's headed. There's also some talk of, probably eventually metering wells. We've got, God, in my marketplace, I've probably got 60% of my clients are on wells.
Wow.
And right now I have, well, not right now, but last year in July, August, I had 4 completely out of water that could not draw another drop out of the ground. And we're trucking water in. And one of them, I'm going to be embarrassed to say, made us put in a huge lawn for a wedding in June of the year, despite our telling them that it was not a good idea. So they were paying, I think it was $1,300 per fill up twice a week to keep the water into the tank for their house use and the lawn use so they could have their wedding.
Wow.
It got bad, and it's not going to get much better this
It's
year.
real. Yeah. I think,
and you've got to take into account that a lot of these places burned in the last few years, so we have no cover to protect from evaporation and water loss. So I tell most of my clients, I recommend, and most of them that we're doing installs on, we will put in sub meters, because I keep trying to tell them, I said, look, when a municipality is going to let you know when they're going dry, you will not know until you're dry if you're on a well. There's just no way to know. So if you keep sucking like there's no tomorrow, there may be a tomorrow. And I don't know how many people on the webinar are on a well, but when I've had the power go off for 24 hours in my house, I have no water, folks. Absolutely not a drop. Everything comes out of a bottle or something we've saved up or siphoning out of a tank. So it can get really real very quickly for well users.
It's a good point.
I think from the non-functional turf ban, it's enforced by the local water agency. So you have to be purchasing water from that local water agency. There is another exemption to the non-functional turf. So in areas like Santa Cruz and Humboldt, where they actually do not have a supply problem at all, their reservoirs are overflowing, and they have such a low per capita water use that those areas are going to probably be exempt from the order as well.
So another question came up, and we've got a couple more minutes left here. Is there a statewide baseline for these reductions, or are the baselines different for each agency?
They're different for each agency, but it's 10 to 20%. So the statewide is a voluntary 15%, and then each agency's water shortage contingency plan has to be somewhere between a 10 to 20% reduction. And in certain areas, it's going to be more than that. So, because they may be at a higher stage or just have other, supply constraints.
Okay.
In Northern California, I think most everybody's using stage 2 as that base. They're not saying they'll say a 20% or 15%, but they're calling it a stage 2 event.
have you heard about any incentives for soil amendments or drip irrigation for these rebate programs?
Yeah,
to help?
some, like I said, some agencies have mulch as an incentive, like Mulch Madness. There's a couple communities in Santa Clara and I believe I'm not sure if they still have their program there in Marin, but they had a mulch program. A lot of agencies do have a per square foot drip incentive in Orange County, in Santa Clarita. So again, it's digging into who do you pay the water bill to, who do they pay the water bill to, and what are the available incentives in that area.
Great. Again, scrolling through questions here. Actually was asked Peter to mention the water budgeting software that you're using again. There was a question about that.
So the California Landscape Contractors Association Certified Water Management Program. You can find it on the website. There's also EPA has a water budget. I think you can probably get overall water budgets from Department of Water Resources. Probably every local municipality probably has a way to get to one, and we'll be more than happy to help you. I think that with the current technology, the difference between now and way back in the day was we did not have the technology to be able to present budgets and manage and record them and push that information forward. And when Maureen was talking about the asking him an exemption if you use a water budget, we have successfully done that twice in my marketplace. Once in 2008, when the county was going to ban irrigation of commercial turf, we went before the State Water Resources Control Board and asked them for a variance for water budgeting. We set it at 0.75, and they granted that. Now, albeit that was in July, and up here our water year is almost over in July, but we were able to generate through the CLCA program. I was able to generate reports and email them out to whoever wanted them, whether it was the city of Healdsburg or Sonoma County Water Agency or city of Santa Rosa. We're able to do that. So we had to put up signage. When we did it in Cloverdale, we put up signage, but it isn't unprecedented. Let me put it to you that way. But again, when Maureen and I talk about creating that relationship with your water conservation specialists in your municipality, can't speak enough to do that. They are wonderful people. They are overworked, they are understaffed, they are underfunded, and they do a hell of a job for what they're given. And having practitioners helping them with that and understanding the importance of it it's money in the bank.
Yeah, that is very true. Interesting question came up, which I don't know that we necessarily have an answer to, but we talked a lot about this during our time preparing for this webinar about why don't we have a resource that people can use statewide that shows what the current water restrictions are. And I appreciate you asking that question. Again, we talked a lot about that. While it may seem like a no-brainer, it's just a matter of the amount of time that it takes to go continuously scraping all 400 water agency websites and trying to figure out what the most recent restrictions are. But do know that we've talked about that. And I know the associations here that are partnering in this event have talked about that as well. And we'll continue to evaluate what kind of solution we can come up with to help, help provide a resource for that. So we are at our time, and I really do want to take this time to thank Peter and Maureen for their participation and being able to be here today, answering their questions and the great information that you've been able to share with everybody. And just a reminder for everybody attending that everyone who registered is going to receive a communication after this event with information on how to view this webinar on demand. And do know, because there's 75 questions that we didn't get to answer today, all those questions are going to be taken into consideration when the organizations are providing additional information and resources that will be coming from the CLCA, IA, and NALP. Also, really importantly, you're going to receive a survey. Please, that will be sent out after this webinar. Please share your thoughts and from the survey. The feedback's really important because it's also going to help us figure out and decide what kind of additional topics that we want to make sure that we cover in the future. And this isn't the end of this discussion by any means. It's just the starting point. And so again, thank you to Peter Marine. Thank you to CLCA, the Irrigation Association, and NALP. And we will see you all here again on the next session. And thank you all for attending as well.
Thanks, Warren.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.